Okay, so in order to use the strategic matrix and show it to you, I'm going to use this particular software called Real-Time Board. So you can see it right there, Real-Time Board. The software is free. You can use it, I think, up to a certain number of options. I think I use the actual free version in this case. And what it allows you to do is to create post-its. Okay, so you just create any sort of post-its from any color and put it on your board, write, so ID number 1, okay, and what it gives you is the possibility to move it anywhere you want, okay? You can zoom in and out. It's an infinite canvas, which means if you look at the size of it, you can really have a lot of possibilities of visualization. There are plenty of options within the software as well. I let you discover them. For the moment, we're gonna work on this question I had, which was, where do I want to go in holidays? Okay, I wanted to solve that. And basically, I formulated the question somehow like, what would the perfect holidays be? So I used that. I ran myself a 4-minute brainstorming. So I didn't use any tricks. I did the work and I found 13 outputs in 4 minutes. I could have run an additional minute to find even more things, but I decided to classify them first. You can see among my ideas, I have things like I would like to learn kite surfing in Brazil for 2 weeks, or learning how to cook molecular cuisine in Barcelona for an intensive week. I'm very much onto this sort of holidays where I can learn things as well. But that could be also wine tasting, learn how to taste wine, País Vasco and Rioja. I'm living in Spain, which makes it easier for me to do things in Spain. So let's create my strategic matrix. The first thing I need to do is to create shapes, okay? So I can actually have this matrix with 2 variables. So you remember the first variable was I want a vertical variable. So the first thing I'm gonna do is to create my matrix. In this case, I'm gonna select a shape. It's here, and I'm gonna put a variable, vertical variable. You remember the impact variable. And then I'm gonna put a second variable, which is gonna be my horizontal variable, and that will be my cost. Okay, so more or less like that. I'm gonna name them quickly so I remember what I'm doing. Impact, in this case. Move it there, perfect. And I'm gonna create a second one, which is gonna be cost. And here I will have cost. So now what happens with my different ideas? Well, let's take them and see one by one. So I'm gonna move them a little bit closer to here, and I can see that very much while I'm working. So learning to kite surf, holidays here. What would the perfect holidays be? Learning to kite surf in Brazil for 2 weeks. For me, that's a very impactful type of holidays because I would learn in 2 weeks to do something I don't know how to do. I would be in a very, very different place. I don't know either Brazil. So that would be extremely impactful, right? So super high in the impact variable. In terms of cost, well, planning for these particular holidays, planning for the kitesurf trip, the cost of it, that would be quite high, right? So I would certainly be in very high impact, but also very high cost. If I take the second one, learning how to cook molecular cuisine in Barcelona for an intensive week. As I said, I'm based in Spain, so the cost is relatively easier. It's easier to prepare. The cost of these holidays is certainly lower than going to Brazil to learn kite surf. And I would still have a very high impact since I'm going to learn something completely new in a city which is quite brilliant. So I would put it around here. Going to practice apnea in the south of Spain for a week. Apnea is a pretty cheap thing to do. Actually, you just need the equipment, and I already have the equipment. So the cost would be quite low in my case, more to the left. The impact of such holidays, it's actually very high as well for me. I'm pretty happy to do that for a week. Travel by motorbike in Vietnam for 3 weeks. You remember I took this example. That would be something similar to learning to kite surf in Brazil. That would be eventually even higher cost, higher impact as well, because this is a trip for a lifetime. So I could move back a little bit my learning to kite surf in Brazil to the left. You see already that all our ideas are relative to one each other. So that's why moving them is extremely important, especially if you're moving them on a physical wall and the whole team participate. You can very much visualize one to the other. So let's go a little bit faster for my next thing. Skydive in Portugal to reach 25 jump certification. The cost is pretty high, but it's not too far from here. The impact is amazingly high for me as well. I'm a skydiver, but just a beginner skydiver, so 25 jumps is great. Enjoy a gastronomic tour across villages in Spain during 10 days. The cost is moderate. To organize it's moderate. The impact is as well moderate in my case. I would enjoy it, but maybe not as much as the rest. Take a road trip with some friends from Croatia to Kosovo during 10 days. That would be a wonderful trip. The cost is cheaper than Brazil and the rest. The impact is very high. So I would probably be around here. See my Erasmus friends and rent a cottage in Finland. Organizing all this in terms of time might take a little bit of time to do that with my friends. Rent a cottage is not that much a cost, but the time is high. That would be a great trip around here. Take a cruise ship trip with the Nomad Cruise in November to Brazil. So Nomad Cruise is a conference for digital nomads. They travel the world. And in this case, the trip is all organized. The cost is moderate to high in terms of money, but the time I invest is quite low. So that's very good. The impact is quite high. So let's put it here. Go sailing to Baleares from southern Spain. I have a good friend who's sailor. She has a boat, so the cost is lower. And that's also a trip with a very high impact. Read multiple books of business and self-development. That's something I like to do in terms of holidays. The cost is very low. Okay, so the cost would be very much on the left, but the impact as well would be quite low. I wouldn't only do holidays like this. Learn how to taste wine in País Vasco and Rioja. Same thing. The impact, well, impact is moderate, so I'll put it in the middle. The cost is pretty low. It would be around here. Finally, do a concert of music on stage during summer. So I love to play music. If I can do a concert, I would certainly remember it. The impact is moderate to low. I've already done a lot. And the cost is moderate to low as well. It's not that difficult. So now what I have is a very good representation of all my ideas on the matrix. I know what is very high cost and high impact. I know especially what is very high impact. That's what is important for me. So now let's do an additional step is to divide my whole matrix into quadrants. So there will be 4 quadrants. I'm gonna maybe put it in another color, so red, so we see it well, okay? And a second line, so I'm gonna duplicate it, and I'm gonna put it in the vertical axis, well in the middle. I think I'm good around here. Maybe go down a little for that one. So I've divided my space into 4 quadrants that are all meaning something. So what does it mean? Well, that's simple. This one is high impact, and in terms of cost, it's pretty low, right? So I'm on the high impact, low cost type of thing. High impact, low cost. Now, if I put that one into the complete opposite quadrant here, what is there? I have low impact, high cost. Okay. Low impact because I'm down there in terms of impact. High cost because I'm on the right side of cost. Here, that would be low impact, low cost. Okay. So for me, not that really exciting holidays, but not that expensive either. And finally here, I'm gonna be into the high impact, high cost. Okay, I will put it below everything else, okay? But you understand what happens here. It's high impact, high cost. So what happens when we brainstorm? Most of the time, you will have fancy ideas. And these fancy ideas are high impact, high cost most often. Why? It's because we tend to have this thinking like the big things will work super well. If you have the means to do that, if you have the time and the money to have high impact, high cost ideas to solve your problem, that's brilliant. Most often what will happen is that you can only pick one of them, right? If I decide to travel by motorbike in Vietnam, I can only do that. And I can probably only learn kitesurfing in Brazil. I need to choose between all that or take a road trip. If during a year I want to plan many holidays, I might have only one very high impact, high cost, correct? So if you are leading a project forward, you have a big challenge and you need to solve it. Most often you will have to find only one solution that fits the high impact, high cost, because you will not have the mental energy and the structure to actually lead multiple of them forward in parallel. Now, what happens with my quadrant? Where do I want absolutely to be? Do I want to be in the low impact, low cost, the low impact, high cost, the high impact, low cost, or the high impact, high cost? I really want to be here. The high impact, low cost thing means that's going to generate for my holidays the most rewarding effects. I'm going to be very, very happy to be doing that. And that's going to cost actually quite cheap for me in terms of time and in terms of money. So what do I find here? I see going to practice apnea in the south of Spain for a week. That would be, for myself, a very high impact, low cost type of holidays. And I would definitely enjoy that to do. Do a concert of music on the stage during summer. Well, it's actually very good because I could do that for a pretty low cost. I need to find other musicians, but I could do and organize that much faster and for less cost than traveling by motorbike in Vietnam. Now, in low impact, low cost, I have a couple of solutions. We're going to detail them, but where do I really don't want to be on my matrix? Well, I really don't want to be on the low impact, high cost, something that costs a lot of money and has actually little impact on my well-being. In this case, enjoy a gastronomic tour across villages of Spain during 10 days. That would be a pretty low impact. I would remember it, but after 10 days of doing the same thing, I would certainly get bored a little bit. So 2 or 3 days could be enough. And that would be pretty high cost to organize and the rest. Actually, from now, I could certainly say, I'm going to duplicate that one, enjoy a gastronomic tour across 3 villages of Spain during 4 days. So in terms of cost, that would certainly be less cost to organize. And in terms of impact, since I would remember it, well, I'm getting a little bit higher there. And you can see it's entering the zone of high impact, low cost. I would remember that. What happens with high impact, low cost is that it's pretty rare to find things in high impact, low cost from your first round of brainstorming. You already have very fancy ideas, which are going onto the top right quadrant. When you do the first round of brainstorming, the high impact, low cost is like your growl. It's where you want to put ideas. So most often you will have to run 1, 2, or 3 brainstorming rounds by yourself to find ideas that would be fitting there. If you're in a group, and that's the magic of groups, and people, when they can structure their brainstorming in a group, find and are surprised by the ideas of their colleagues and their friends and the people who might be advisors and come to your brainstorming. And you will discover that at least 1 or 2 of them end up here. If you have 10 outputs per person, 5%, with the overlaps, some of you will think the same thing. With the overlaps, we might find 35 or 40 different solutions. Then you will be sure that among them, at least one is going to fit here. If not, you start again a brainstorming on the same question, you dig a little more, and that's where your brain starts to make the second step, activate himself, and be able to generate concepts here. Finally, what happens if I have low impact, low cost, and I have lots of different ideas, and I don't have ideas in the high impact, low cost? If you actually start to, let's say my Enjoy a Gastronomic tool would be low impact for the sake of this demonstration. Well, I have learned how to taste wine in País Vasco and Rioja, enjoy a gastronomic tour across 3 villages of Spain, and you have read multiple books, business books and self-development. So all these things are pretty low cost. But when you gather them together, what happens? Suddenly it becomes much more interesting. It becomes, if I had holidays and we're doing all these things in the same holidays, that would certainly raise the impact a lot. What will happen is that it will raise the cost as well, but not that much because we're still on the low impact, low cost. Okay? And so this trio now becomes extremely interesting for my next holidays because that could be definitely something I'd like to do. So let's color them in something different because in this case, I would say that's amazing. This group of ideas could work by themselves, and that could be an amazing opportunity to do something during a week or 10 days, which is even better. So when we work in advertising, most often when you have very, very big creative concepts, it's because you've been fusioning, melting, mixing different low cost, low impact ideas, and they have been progressing in terms of impact. They have been progressing in terms of cost as well. You remember we were around here on the horizontal axis. Now we are here. It's going to be more complex to organize, but the group is still in this quadrant and it's exciting. This is a strategic matrix you can do with any sort of things. As I said in real-time board, that's a way for me to show it to you. I could duplicate that with a complete other type of post-its, okay, and continue my job of classifying all these new ideas. I try to brainstorm at least once a day. That's what I said at the very beginning of my session. What I don't necessarily do is strategically plan everything every day. I can reserve sometimes, probably the next day, if the problem and the challenge is very important to me, to go onto that particular classification. When you do that in a group, what happens is magical because people suddenly lose their territoriality with their ideas and start to relate to the ideas in a very logical and rational manner, which means at that moment you can start a conversation. And at that moment you can start to ideate more things and try to place them in other quadrants. If you're very, very objective in the way you do that, or if you have a facilitator that helps you do it, if you've done it yourself in the next minutes with your own ideas, you will have a very, very good experience to lead these sort of things in a group. And you will see that the difference between these 6 people, 3 ideas, 1 compromise, everyone frustrated, is massive because now we have 30 outputs. We have a strategic matrix to classify these outputs objectively, and we have possibly one solution to our problems that is brilliant and you never thought about it before. So that's it for the strategic matrix. The session will continue a little bit forward and will explain as well, show you some resources you could use. But if you now take 10 minutes, 15 minutes, classify your ideas along the very same principles, you will see that magically your brain will have thought of great solutions. And if not, you can still run an additional minute or 2 minutes of brainstorming and try to complement your thinking now that you have a very nice logical framework to classify all that. Thank you and see you in the next session.